That's right. You're listening to another episode of the co-main event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. We're both longtime MMA journalists, and for the last 13 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. And this week, Ben, everybody knows rankings have been in the news a lot lately in MMA, especially since Dana White reaffirmed his longstanding hatred of the rankings kept by his own organization
Yeah.
in the UFC. We all know he's gone as far as to, I guess at least allegedly commission Mark Zuckerberg to come up with some kind of, again, allegedly impartial, unfortunately, probably also earth destroying AI system to keep track of the rankings.
I mean, when you say that, you say it as if they're sitting there having a conversation where he's like, Mark, will you create automated rankings for me? And Mark says, yes, I will, Dana. I'll go right back to the office. Right. I mean, what we're talking about really is Dana's like, I will have my factor call upon your grace's factor. My guy will talk to your guy about it. Just whatever guy I don't have busy trying to figure out how the hell to do a event on the White House lawn is going to get with whoever Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have busy talking about, how we can get around antitrust legislation or some shit. They're going to get together. The smart people will figure it out, and then they'll come back to us with an idea. But it also doesn't seem like we've been a while since we heard anything.
Didn't he say at one point that Zuckerberg was on board? Didn't he? Wasn't there like an update where he was like, I've connected with Zuck and he's into it. I thought that happened, but maybe I'm just making it up.
But I mean, Dana White joined the board of directors for Meta, so certainly there's a relationship there and there's an open line of communication, I'm sure. But it also seems like Dana White will just say some stuff.
What?
And then sometimes time will go by and we'll never hear about that shit again, bro. Like, that's how it was with the anti-piracy efforts where we were watching people's houses. That's how it's been with a lot of other shit. Like, it's entirely possible he's mad about the rankings. He's stuck because he wants to be seen as doing something. He's mad about the rankings. He knows other people are mad about the rankings. He wants to show, hey, I'm on it. Don't worry. I'm sick of this shit. And maybe talk to somebody. Remember, we used to talk about fights in the goddamn metaverse. Remember that? Remember how often we'd hear about fights in the goddamn metaverse? Remember how often we hear about UFC, NFT shit, all this kind of stuff, and then it just sort of quietly goes away. Like, maybe this will be a thing where 2 months from now he'll be like, oh, by the way, they're finished. Here's our AI rankings or whatever. Or maybe we'll never hear about it again until next time he's mad about the rankings, and it'll never come to fruition. You don't really know on this shit.
I guess now that you mention it, now that you say it that way, the UFC and Facebook don't have a considerably positive track record for getting shit done, right? Like, we were going to do
not since Facebook prelims, brother.
Yeah, no fights in the metaverse thus far, but maybe that's something we can still look forward to. Well, Tapology's beating them to it. Actually, don't you wish one of the things that he would talk about, but then would kind of fade into the background, would be power slap? Like, he's stuck with that for like a surprisingly long time. I wish that was one of the things where he was like, oh, I got a great idea. I'm just going to have a new sport where people slap each other in the face. It's going to be awesome. You guys are going to love it. Biggest sport in the world. And then we just never hear about that again. Unfortunately, that has proved to be a thing we have to hear about over and over again.
Well, because that is a moneymaker. Even though it sucks and nobody wants to watch it, I still believe it's a moneymaker because it costs so little to do. You pay the athletes nothing because they are not even athletes for the most part. You use your own existing UFC production infrastructure to do whatever you need in terms of pumping out promos and giving you a place to film it. So the overhead is extremely low. The rankings, it'd be nice to fix them, but it's not really going to affect the bottom line. So maybe there's less urgency there. The Tapology one is interesting though, because I'd heard about this before. They told me that they were working on this. They've been working on it off and on for about 5 years from what they told me. And then when they just went public with it at the beginning of August, I did a story. It came out yesterday on the Uncrowned where I talked to them about it. And they stressed that theirs is not an AI ranking system, because he made the point where he was like, mostly what we see AI doing right now are these like essentially a large language model, which It could spit out some bullshit for you. If you asked it, who is the top welterweight in the UFC, it could give you an answer, but it's kind of bullshitting that answer to some extent. Like their goal was to try to come up with like an automated system where you could feed it data about what has happened in these fights, and it'll absorb everybody's data and spit out a number. And the interesting thing to me about it is I know everybody wants to look at the top 10 in each division and be like, does the top 10 make sense? And if you look at it, some of them you go, yeah, that seems about right. And others divisions, you look at it and you be like, I don't know how your algorithm came up with this. To me, the most interesting part, though, is that they're not just ranking top 10 the way we normally do, or top 15 the way the UFC does. They're ranking every single fighter in the UFC using this
which
algorithm.
Obviously has some hilarious implications, potentially hilarious implications. Look, man, this is MMA. We know this. I know this about you. You know this about me. I know this about every fighter on the UFC roster. I know this about every MMA fan walking the face of the earth right now. As soon as we found out about this, as soon as we went to Tapology and saw it, the very first thing all of us thought was, who is last?
Yeah.
That's the
last
very first thing.
And for one thing, it is kind of eye-opening because it'll just show you the numbers and you can see how many more fighters are in some divisions than others. And it's what you would think, right? Like it's not like a big surprise which ones have more and which ones have fewer. But when you actually look at it and you're just like, all right, lightweight, for example, 94 fighters. Featherweight, 79, also 79 in bantamweight, all this kind of shit. And then you go and you look at heavyweight, 34 fighters. Light heavyweight, 37 fighters. Women's bantamweight, 28 fighters. You know, that shit just really shows you, okay, some divisions are way more of a deep pool than others. And other divisions, like, you know, if you're anywhere in the women's bantamweight division, it just feels like you might never be more than 1 or 2 wins from really breaking into the top 10. The thing that's interesting to me is, like, especially you take a division like lightweight, has the most fighters in it, and you have so many good fighters in that division. And you know, there's a bunch of people who were going, look, I know I'm not in the top 10 or top 15 yet. I know I'm not there, but I'm close. I might just be a win or 2 away. I get the right win, the right matchups. I could, you know, where I'm sitting now, I have a good 6 months to a year. I'm in that top 15. I'm in the top 10. Because it's like, to the fighters, there's a top 15 in the UFC's rankings, and then there's this outer darkness that everybody else is just sort of floating in out there in space. And you don't know if you're right there on the cusp of getting in, or if you're way the hell out there. And they keep you sort of in the dark about that until you go and you look at some of these rankings and you go, holy shit, I'm fucking 78th? Are you kidding me? Like, I knew I wasn't right in the top 15, top 1. I knew I wasn't right there yet, but I didn't think I was so far out. And it also creates a thing where before they'd come to you and be like, how about this guy versus this guy? And you go, all right, neither one of us are ranked. You know, we both got similar records in the UFC or similar records overall. Sure, that fight makes some sense. But now if you go and you look at it and you're 31st and he is 68th, you're going, fuck you. There's no way I'm doing this one, right? Like I'm way higher up than he is. Whereas before, that was not that clear to anybody. I mean, the UFC, I'm sure, has their own sort of internal ranking system, whether they're putting exact numbers on people or not. But to a lot of the fighters, that was way more opaque. And you see an example that I looked at in these rankings was this fight on Saturday with Neil Magny and Izzy Dos Santos, right? Where Neil Magny was pretty far down there, and Izzy Dos Santos was a little bit further up than him. And then Neil Magny goes out there, gets a win, you know, after a little bit of a rough stretch, and he jumps up like 12, 15 places or whatever it is in the rankings. And that's the kind of thing where their point when I talked to Gregory Sachs, the Tapology co-founder, about why this matters, why even spend all this time doing it, because it does sound like it was a pain in the ass to come up with.
I mean, it's got to be impossible to come up with a perfect system to rank MMA fighters, just because there's so many goddamn facets. As you point out in your article, this isn't like ranking like a chess champion top 10. It's not like ranking the NFL teams. It's, there's a lot more. Even though what we're trying to do is take the vibes out of this, there's a lot more deja vus and what have yous, coincidences.
Well, especially because you have to come up with a system that can operate with hands off. So you have to tell the computer, essentially, here's what matters and what matters less. And you only have so many different like data points that you can do that with. You have like wins, losses, method of victory, opponent's record, common opponents, who else like each other have fought, all that kind of shit. But it's like, as he pointed out to me at one point, he's like, the computer does not watch the fights. The computer cannot watch the fights. And so if somebody goes in there and you look good, but you didn't win, you look good, you would have won if you hadn't lost. It's going to have a tough time telling those would have won if you hadn't lost kind of fights. It's also going to have a tough time being able to determine, like, hey, you beat a guy who's beat some good guys, but we have also seen a drop off for this person that you beat. We were starting to think you beat them when they were on the tail end. You beat them toward the end of their good run, end of their prime. And we will sometimes, when we're doing rankings as human beings, it's natural to be like, okay, you beat him, like Paddy Pimblett beating Michael Chandler or something, where we're like, you beat the shit out of him, bro. Also, we think maybe he's kind of done. And this takes that out of it, takes those vibes out of it, but it also makes it hard to know like where to put your emphasis if the computer can only like read certain, it can't like look at it and be like, okay, but his jab did seem much better. His cardio seemed much better than this guy, he lost, but it seems like he's improving. Seems like we saw a lot of good stuff from him in this fight. Like, the computer can't really do that. And it's also tricky because it's like, you have to come up with that system where you tell the computer, here's how you do it for all future information you get. Just do it the same way. And the only way to really know if you got it is to look at the results that the computer spits out and see if they make sense or not. And you're going to have to look at a lot of different results for a long time. And they admitted that he was like, we tried a couple different models for this. And we would look at the results and be like, no, this sucks. This doesn't make any sense. What is throwing it off? Trying to go back in there and figure it out. But the only way you're going to know if it's doing it right, if your formula is right, is if the results make sense to how a human being would have ranked them to what makes sense to us. And so then do you kind of accidentally put vibes back in it? I think it's an interesting question.
Was it because the computer originally had Nate Landwehr #1 in all categories?
Well, I think we would have declared that we're done at that point. We did it.
Yeah. I am currently at work coding a system that will do that.
No,
just
you're
have
not.
The train.
No,
have
you're
the train. Not. If I knew anything about coding, I would be. How about that?
See, okay. Nate Landwehr is exactly the kind of fighter who a vibes-based system would benefit him more, because we like to see him fight. We enjoy having that guy around. We think of it, you kind of picture him and you're like, he can go out there and win almost any fight, bro. Whoop his ass and see what happens. And yet a purely analytical, unemotional computer system might look at Nate Landwehr and be like, I don't see it. I don't see
he's
it.
Not a numbers guy. He's not a by the numbers guy. Well, what about this aspect of let's talk about the secret sauce, right? The proprietary formula ultimately that Tapology has decided on here to base the rankings on. And they won't tell us exactly what it is, which I suppose is smart and maybe necessary on their part, just to sort of protect their work, make sure that you don't turn around and suddenly chaddundas.com has a bunch of computer generated rankings. But does that bother us at all? That we don't know specifically what goes on with the secret sauce, because there is already a certain amount of secret sauce that goes on with the UFC's rankings. And I think we all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't love it, especially just as a journalist working on the story, where I keep trying to ask him, like, I'm asking him specific questions about how does it weight this, how does it weight, and there was some stuff he would tell me about how they were doing it and why they did, and how they had tweaked it over time. Because it's like, for instance, where he decided we're only going to look at your last 6 fights because they felt like beyond that is not as useful for measuring where you are now. And 6, I'm just like, why 6? Why not 5? Why not 4? Why not 7? You know? And so that seems like a little bit like maybe you decided on trial and error, or like the way that they do inactivity, where the 21 months is the mark for inactivity, because it's like they want to give you time to blow out a knee, get ACL surgery, come back, get a fight booked, you know, like a reasonable amount of time to be able to do all that shit without letting you just hang around forever. That kind of stuff, where like I'm asking some of these questions and I'm getting answers, and other questions I'm getting secret sauce, can't tell you that. And like you, I understand why you have to do it that way. If you just give us everything about the way you set this up, some smart computer nerd will steal it. A bunch of smart computer nerds will steal it. The UFC, come on, you could picture it, right? Like this guy throws up like a public thing of like, here's the code for it, here's how it works, all that stuff. And then 6 weeks later, the UFC is like, we fixed it, meta branded UFC ranking system, and it's basically the exact same, maybe with 1 or 2 tweaks. You could absolutely imagine, and they would give you no credit. They would not cut you out. They want to own absolutely every aspect of the sport. They would take your shit for sure.
Yeah.
So if it worked at all, they would take your shit. So I understand why they have to do it that way, but it also makes it a little tough to tell, because all we really have to go on then is, what are the numbers say now? Do we like that? Do we not? Do we think that it makes sense? I also wonder, Ariel and the dudes were talking about it on his show today, and Connor Rooks brought this up that I thought was kind of a good point, where it's like, we'll love to sit around and argue about rankings in this sport and in kind of all sports. That's what they do for most MMA websites. Like, that's why you even bother doing them, is they are engagement fodder, because people will go and they'll look at the rankings and then they'll argue with you about what a fucking idiot, how do you have this guy over this guy? Like, that's kind of the point of it. And it will be the same for the Tapology rankings, no matter what. They give you a lot more to argue about, because you can argue about whether this guy deserves to be number 32 or 33 in the featherweight division. But it also, is it going to be less fun for people to argue about if what I'm arguing with is a robot? I can argue with you as the person who programmed the robot, that you're stupid, whatever your formula you came up with sucks and is not working. But is that going to be as fun for people? I don't know. I don't know about that part. If people are just going to be like, I want to tell the guys at MMA Fighting that they're stupid by name, like in their comment section whenever they post one of these rankings articles. But what am I going to say to the algorithm?
Yeah. See, this harkens back to my theory that we actually love stuff like bad stoppages in this sport. We try to act like we're mad about it, but we really love it, because then we have something to argue and complain about for the next 48 hours to a week. And frequently we're doing it about fights that we otherwise would just have completely forgotten about.
Well, you're until it fucks up your parlay. And then ref fucked me, gets entered into your data on the $20 we never want to see again sheet. Okay, but this the other thing I was talking about before I got sidetracked here, when I was asking him why do this, why go through all this pain in the ass, why does it matter? And one point he brought up that I do think is relevant is, he was like, right now you watch a lot of UFC fights where you can't tell what this is about, what it's for, what the stakes are. All you know is, in the parlance of the CME, it is better to win these fights than to lose them. You know that the guy gets twice as much money for winning as he does for losing. But other than that, you're watching two randos on a UFC fight night at the Apex, and you're just like, the winner is not necessarily going to be anybody we're all talking about on Monday, or anybody we're talking about for a title shot. And the loser is, all we know is he's going to be even further down than that. And if you have numbers, even if what you're saying to yourself is, this is number 37 against number 42, it's not that scintillating, really. But at least it gives you some perspective, some context to be like, here's where they are with respect to their peers. Here's where they could reasonably go depending on how well this goes for them. And at least I know something, that it's not just this guy's going to fight this guy. Why do I give a shit? Because it says UFC on their gloves, because we're using the gloves where the decals don't fall off.
Yep.
But otherwise, this fight could have happened in LFA or PFL or some shit, and I would not have known or cared. This at least gives you a little bit of a framework to understand what it is we're watching.
Yeah, and I think that's cool. At the same time, though, if what we're talking about is practical applications, like the one thing that you can't account for in your algorithm are the whims of Dana White, right? That's one thing that we probably can't accurately anticipate. And so if we're talking about practical applications or what these numbers could mean and how they could inform our view of various fights and or fighters, that's one of the things I keep coming back to. Like you mentioned in your article, Jeremy Stephens, right? Jeremy Stephens, according to Tapology's lightweight rankings, number 83 out of 94 total lightweights, which, that is probably kind of realistic, maybe, for Jeremy Stephens. Although if you are Jeremy Stephens and you see that, you probably are pulling out the typewriter to type up a sternly worded letter of complaint to Tapology. But at the same time, Jeremy Stephens gets like 2 knockouts. Maybe that shows that Dana White is around to see himself.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's a what have you done for me lately business, and we're talking about Jeremy Stephens is back.
Yeah.
He's that kind of guy, right? And again, that's vibes and innuendos, deja vus, and what have yous.
Yeah, and that is always how it's going to work, right? And it's like, especially, we talk about this all the time with something like a top 10, where if you're 5 and the people ahead of you are either the champion has already beat them or they're uninteresting for one reason or another, hey, you could jump right up there and get a title shot, especially if we like you, we think you're exciting, you have a right narrative. Like, we always sort of understand that. And I think that that's not necessarily anything that they're planning to go. Like, I asked him at some point, like, what do you think the UFC will think about this? And he was just like, I don't really presume to think the UFC will necessarily think anything about it. And I certainly don't think that it will change anything about the way they do matchmaking, because they're running a business. They're running an entertainment, essentially, business. They're not going to sit here and be like, well, it wouldn't make sense. Like 42 has to fight 43. Like, they're not going to do that. There's a lot of reasons why, and you get it. And I would love to be in the room the first time some fighter or his manager says something to Mick Maynard or Sean Shelby like, doesn't make sense for me to fight this guy. I'm 28 in the Tapology rankings. He's 40. And they'd be like, fuck off. Yeah. Fuck you. You want us to sit you down for 6 months and you can watch money bleed out of your account? We don't give a fuck about your Tapology rankings. Take the fight or don't. Like, that's how that conversation would go. But I do think, it's fun always for people to have rankings to argue about. The more you give them on there, like the more you can just kind of look beyond like top 15. I think it's interesting. Like, I can absolutely see fans, you're sitting around, you're watching a dog shit UFC fight night from the Apex, like the one we got coming up on Saturday. You're watching the prelims of this goddamn thing. You don't really know these people. Maybe you're feeling like, have I seen this guy before? Have I not? I don't remember what he's done. And you might before have looked up his record to be like, do I have any recollection of watching these fights? Do I know anybody he's fought? Now you look him up on the rankings, and if he's in the UFC, he's on there somewhere. You can go find it. You can look at it, see where he is, and respect to other people. I don't think it gives you at least a conversation topic. And shit, if you're the UFC, I would think you would welcome that part at least, because shit, what else do you have to use to get us interested in some of these fights? Now, you might turn around to the UFC and be like, we'd rather people not be able to know that, like, to look at an upcoming fight card and be like, shit, man, outside the main event, there is nobody higher than 30 on this thing. It is dog shit. Like, they probably wouldn't love that, but I do think that they would like if people just have some reason to give a damn about a lot of these fights that they don't now.
Yeah. Just out of my own curiosity, one of the things I noticed when I was looking at this is that they don't have pound for pound rankings. Is that something that you asked Gregory Sachs about at all?
No, because I don't give a shit about pound for pound rankings.
Well, I
How
wonder
would
if
you even
it's
do it, you know?
well, that's the thing. Like I was wondering, is it because they know that pound for pound rankings is bullshit? I mean, if you're trying to drive traffic, I would think that pound for pound rankings would be like one of the more viewable / looked at / clicked things that Tapology could do. But I wonder if it's just kind of impossible to do that with a computer algorithm, since
Yeah,
ain't
because it's
nothing
like
more based on vibes than the pound for pound list.
exactly, because it's like, how would you tell it, hey, heavyweight, it's got to be in there, but also it's kind of a dog shit division, and we don't, for the purposes of pound for pound, we are not that interested in heavyweight. Like it's, I don't know what you'd tell the computer about pound for pound, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting. I'm glad it's out there now. People can check it out over at Tapology to the extent that they're interested in it. And it's, I think it's a cool thing to have. Remember, you're listening to the Co-Main Event podcast proper. This show drops every Tuesday afternoon for free in your timelines and your podcast libraries. But if you want even more of the Co-Main Event, you can find Ben Folks and myself all week over on Patreon. Hit us up at patreon.com/co-main event and get loads of extra audio and video content, as well as access to our official Discord message board where they're talking about fights and a lot of other stuff literally all the time. Join the team. We'd love to have you. Head over there to patreon.com/co-main event and sign up at any one of our many, many handy tiers of patronage. Again, patreon.com/co-main event. Another great way to support the show is by going to co-mainevent.com and checking out our merchandise shop. We got t-shirts, we got hats, we got hoodies, we got lots more. You can stop by and pick up the Daddest Man on the Planet coffee mug or t-shirt, both of which are the best sellers over on the shop by a wide margin. You could also get a Bobby Knuckles t-shirt. You could get a Volcomania t-shirt. We got it all over there. Go to our website, comainevent.com, and click the link at the top of the page that says shop. As always, we partner with our friend Johnny Ashcroft on the shop. He is a graphic designer from Portland, Oregon. We can't recommend him highly enough. For all your design needs, hit him up at studiosuperconductor.com or on Instagram at studiosuperconductor. Right now, like we always do about this time, let's do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail this week comes to us from Jeff, aka Goldberg_ebooks over on our official Discord. He writes, I've been following the sport and the 125-pound division for a while, even when it was mostly relegated to Japan and the Tachi Palace Casino. God, well, those were the days. Remember the Tachi Palace? God.
Oh, yeah.
Whew.
I mean, I assume it's still there. You're talking about it like it's been razed to the ground.
Well, I don't know if the Tachi Palace exists and doesn't have fights. Does it make a sound? I don't know. It's not on my radar anymore. I know you are more inclined to be going over to the small time gaming casinos over there in Northern California.
Yeah, no, they got a good rewards program. I'm building up some points.
But we digress. Is Pantoja versus Van potentially the most marketable flyweight title fight ever? Joshua Van is 23, soon to be 24-year-old super prospect who looks better in each fight and has a compelling backstory as a Burmese immigrant fighting for a better life for his family. Pantoja is the second best flyweight champion we've seen and seems to get more dangerous with age. The last time I was this jazzed for a 125-pound title fight was Cejudo versus Dillashaw. Am I just a hopeless romantic about this fight, or does the UFC really have a unique opportunity to put their promotional muscle behind this one and get people excited for the 125-pound division? Love you both equally. Ben, now we can note that a title fight between Alexander Pantoja and Joshua Van would pit the number 1 versus number 4 fighters in the Tapology flyweight rankings.
Here's here's my question to this question. Why do you do this to yourself? Why why do you keep telling yourself that maybe this one will be the one that finally gets the flyweight division the respect it deserves, damn it? Because it just, I feel like we've done this so much, right? Where we've looked over the years at fights and we're like, all right, people gotta take notice now, right? Like now's the time where people finally be like, all right, I don't care if these dudes are 5'3", they can fucking straight up scrap. They put on amazing, exciting, high energy, high pace fights, technically brilliant, a lot of fun to watch. The heads care, the bitch ass casuals don't, and I don't know if that's necessarily going to change with this one, but I feel like our hope springs eternal for that. We keep thinking that it's going to happen. It's just the right champion, the right matchup, the right pairing, and history tells us that you still only move the needle so much with the flyweights. I mean, there could be a flyweight Conor McGregor who shows up, and that's how it's typically gone. You know, the UFC didn't believe in lightweight, didn't believe in featherweight, all this shit until you get somebody good enough who gets people excited about it. Sean O'Malley comes along at bantamweight. But I also think that, like, we, the hardcores and the nerds, we are the target demo for the flyweights, man. And maybe we just need to accept that.
Yeah. If you're super into throwing darts, you can't sit around and wonder when the rest of mainstream sports culture is going to catch up with how awesome darts are, right? You just got to go love the darts, man. And you can't worry about who else is going to be super interested in your discussion of Clarence McInerney, the greatest darts thrower of the 21st century. I don't know. I made that up. I don't know anything about darts. I'm just saying, trying to make my extended darts metaphor work.
Yeah,
but
it's maybe gone on too long.
You know what I'm saying about the darts and the flyweights. Just enjoy the darts, man. Don't worry about what anybody else is going to say about it. And you know,
it is a good fight. Say, that is like, yeah, I'll be excited about that one.
I was just going to say, this is a hell of a fight for flyweight, and I think many of us will be looking forward to it. And dare I say, this is a fuck the haters type situation.
There are many such situations, honestly.
That is true. Next question this week comes to us from Eric in Toronto, who writes, this past weekend, Hector Lombard took on Czech Congo in an ultimate pillow fight. A pillow fight these two competitors appeared to take completely seriously. Lombard's defense game was tight, even with Congo throwing that spinning shit. In the end, Lombard's forward pressure was too much for the big man, and Hector Lombard was crowned your new Hush Super Fight champion. Have we found the new league for old UFC fighters to compete in after their MMA career is over? When they feel that competitive itch and think about coming out of retirement, forget freak show boxing, forget bare knuckle, pillow fighting is where it's at. Now, the pillow fighting league or shit has been around for a while now, years, right? It's been a while since I'd heard anything about it. I was somewhat enthused to hear that we're still doing it, that we're still pillow fighting in places. And at this point, dare I say, the original pillow fighting idea was just ahead of its time, because now we have come to a place in combat sports culture where, man, we'll try anything once. You know what I mean? Like at this point, if you give us something new, give us anything that we can sink our teeth into, and we'll give you a chance at the very least.
I mean, when I saw this come across the timeline, I had the same thought that I'm sure a lot of other people did, which was better than slap fighting. It's better than slap fighting. It's not even close, because at least there's defense. There's a strategy that you can employ in pillow fighting. And honestly, a lot of people can at least relate to some aspect of the experience. Not a lot of us have stood there and have fucking pork rind or whoever it is slap us with his meaty paw while we had to stand there with our hands behind our back. But we've all been in a pillow fight at some points in our lives. So like we could understand some of the pillow fight strategy, and you're curious, how would professional fighters go about it? I'd be very curious, how did they train? Because you know, at some point they must have been in the gym with their buddies and been like, hey man, practice is over. Before you go out to the car, you got a sec? because I wanted to work on some stuff here. I got this thing coming up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, what you got? Boxing match, kickboxing match? You can do some MMA? What's up, man?" No, hold on, let me go out. I got some pillows in the trunk that I brought from home. Let's just move around and let's just check out the range, see what's possible. Maybe work on some spinning stuff, some attacks they're not going to see coming. I got a pillow fight coming up, man. Like that must have been hilarious. I also wondered, how do they, like, there must be like a regulation pillow that you have to use, right? Like you can't just like show up with your shit that you got.
A pillow full of quarters, nickels, just a pillow full of nickels.
Here's how I think it should work. They should have everybody got to show up without a pillow, and you go down into a wood paneled basement. Everybody gets to go down individually. You walk down the beat up old carpet down into a wood paneled basement, and spread out all around there are a bunch of different pillows, varying shapes, sizes, different kind of strategies you could go with. Maybe there's like a lottery system to determine who gets first pick. You get to go down there, pick it up, feel, maybe this one has some like good heft that you can really get behind, but the pillowcase on it doesn't have a great grip. Got some downsides. Maybe this other one looks like it's brand new and everything, but it's a little stiff. You're looking for something that has a little more flexibility to it. Like, yeah, I think like the pillow selection process could be as fascinating as the fight itself. Like let's really lean into the absurdity of it.
Some of the pillows look like Henry Cejudo's face, right? That's what you're talking about.
Some of them clearly you're just like, whose grandmother died on this exact pillow? This one's been around for a while. That kind of shit.
People would be like, check Congo. He's going with the beanbag.
Yeah.
By God, Czech Congo has selected the beanbag.
Hector going with the silk pillowcase. I think that could be a mistake. Might go flying out of your hands at the wrong moment.
Look, man, all I know is he ain't never pillow fought somebody like me before. I'm built different.
I was pillow fighting with my older brothers from the time I could walk. I was bred for this shit.
Next question this week comes from former professional wrestler Mike Rotunda, most famous for portraying in the WWE the heel character IRS. He writes,
"Oh yes, who could forget?
I am a shit-eating wild man. I watch every fight the UFC puts out and most of the PFL and 1FC too. The card looked like an episode of Dana White's Contender Series under the UFC Fight Night banner. I believe he's talking about this last week. Pretty much most of the fighters on the card, I have no idea who they are. I believe that the Apex has its benefits because most people would not pay the big bucks for the UFC charges for any event. How many events each year will continue to happen at the Apex? I think a good UFC schedule would be per month, one pay-per-view, one arena fight night, one Apex fight night, one foreign fight night every other month. What do you guys think of that? Also, remember to pay your taxes so I won't have to come after you. Multiple exclamation points.
There's a lot of exclamation points after that.
I've been singing the praises of the fewer fight schedule. Almost this exact schedule is the one that I have said would be ideal. I've been saying this for years, going back even to the Fox days when the schedule first became bloated. However, Mike Rotunda, IRS, this is another situation where I have to ask, like, we can't do this to ourselves, man. Like, we can't wish on a fallen star that there's going to be fewer UFC events, because unless with the new television deal we get ourselves into a completely different monetization system, the thing that the UFC gets paid for now and will get paid for the foreseeable future is producing a certain number of content hours for a streaming service. They make their money elsewhere as well, pay-per-view, site fees, but mostly we are getting paid to be a content creation company for some various streaming service. And as long as that is the case, we will be turning the crank and pumping out as much of the sausage as we possibly can every single year. It would be great if we could go back to a system like the one that Mike Rotunda, IRS, advocates for here, but we're just not going to do it. That's just not
Yeah.
going to happen unless something really drastic changes.
Also, I think one of the things that we're seeing take shape with the UFC calendar now is that there's a seasonal aspect to it based mainly on when places are willing to pay you those site fees. Because at this point, the UFC has kind of adopted the position, if you're not paying us just to show up, we're not coming. It's like, we just making a whole bunch of money off the fans on ticket sales and pay-per-views and TV deals and advertising. That is not enough. We must also make taxpayer fucking money from these places that pay us just to bring the show to town. And sometimes a year, fewer places are willing to do that just because of other shit that's going on that it doesn't make sense for them. But you'll get certain stretches where you're like, we're doing Apex, like, we had an Apex one last weekend, we got an Apex one this weekend. We got to keep the calendar moving because we got obligations we got to meet on the broadcast side, and we got a million fighters under contract that we owe fights to. But if we don't have people paying you to show up, then we're going to stay home where we keep costs low. Production is really easy for us. But then you look at the calendar after this weekend, you don't have another Apex show on the books through the end of November. You got, next weekend, you're in Chicago for UFC 319. And then you go to Shanghai for a fight night. You go to Paris for a fight night. San Antonio, Texas for the Noche UFC, which has moved all around. Then Australia, T-Mobile Arena for UFC 320. Then you got a fight night in Brazil, fight night in Vancouver for the first time in a little while. You got UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi. Then you go to Qatar for a fight night. Like they're all on the road for a long time after this because that money is there. And you got more people, in the fall willing to pony up that dough and get you out there. And that's just kind of how it's going to, like, we could wish for it to be a certain way all we want, but it's money, money, money. And I would think Mike Rotunda, of all people, would understand that.
Yeah. I hope that he didn't get laid off with these cuts, with the federal cuts that are going on.
Hope he didn't get doged.
Yeah, that'd be too bad. Next question this week comes to us from the Plow King, who writes, pour a little out for the big homie Martin Buday, the heavyweight who just beat Buchecha. Am I saying that right? Buchecha?
Yeah.
Buchecha?
Sure. Close enough.
Over there at UFC Abu Dhabi is now no longer a UFC fighter. Apparently they let his contract run out and didn't offer him a new one, even though he's won 3 straight and is 7-1 in the UFC and 16-2 overall. I get it. No one cares about Martin Buday. Real quick, without looking, name a single other person he's fought in the UFC aside from Buchecha, who I just told you about. Ben, can you do that?
I can, but only because I looked it up after seeing this question. Andre Arlovski. He fought Andre Arlovski.
I mean, that's if you have a heavyweight that has spent any time in the UFC at all, you just guess Andre Arlovski. You're going to be right probably 60% of the time. The Plow King goes on, but what does it say about this sport that you can be on paper pretty damn good at it, better than almost everyone you've faced, and still the big league is like, scram kid, you bother me. Not only has Martin Buday won all but one of his UFC fights and is 16-2 overall, he's basically only had one loss in his relevant professional career because his first loss was at his second pro fight in October of 2017. Since then, he won them all in a row until he lost to Shamil Gaziev at UFC 296 in December of 2023, and then won 3 straight after that. He's 32 years old. He's put up this pretty good record. You would think if there were any division in the UFC where you just needed pretty good warm bodies to hang around, it would be heavyweight. But he is not the most exciting guy. He is never going to be the most exciting guy. And I don't know, man. Maybe we just decided that he wasn't for us.
It does sort of make you feel like, oh yeah, this isn't actually a sport in the traditional sense, though, right? Because it's like, if you could, and we had this conversation a lot back when Ben Askren was bounced from Bellator to ONE, and we finally saw him toward the end over in the UFC. But the the thing is, if you could conceivably be unbeatable, undefeated, nobody can fuck with you, but we hate watching you. We think your style is boring. We think you're boring as a person. Whatever it is, we just don't want to see you. You could be almost blackballed from the sport without it being called that. You could be like, people are just like, there's no home for you here because we can't make any money off of you. We don't think that you're interesting enough, even though you could be the absolute best at it. And there's no other real sport that's like that. That's when you start to feel like, okay, yeah, this is pro wrestling, except that between the time the cage door closes and when it opens again, then it's legit. And then at no other time. It just does not operate that way. It also makes you wonder, like, if the UFC put him in here, he was on Ariel's show and I think he described himself as like upset and sad at the end of the UFC, because he was just like, he said they did it with this first UFC contract where they let him fight to the very last fight, did not renew him, and then he won his last fight on the contract, and so they renewed him, gave him a new contract, and then he thought it's going to be the same thing here, let you fight to the end. They put him up there against Pacheco. You got to think like, okay, were they just thinking Pacheco would win this one and then we'd be done with Martin Buday and we could get excited about having like a jiu-jitsu phenom kind of guy, injecting some new life into the division, that kind of thing. I don't know. Like, I don't know what their plan was, and if they were just like, all right, you beat him and the fight sucked, get out of here. Like that. It does sort of just like highlight what we're actually doing here. And you see some fighters every now and then sort of waking up more to that possibility. They seem to notice it more when they're like, why does this guy get better opportunities, bigger fights than me or than somebody else? They don't think about it as much as like, hey, you go fucking 7-1, have a 3-fight winning streak, and they still tell you like, nah, no thanks.
Yeah.
Like, that's gotta suck, man, because you're just like, I thought, what the hell? I thought we were supposed to win these goddamn fights,
Yeah, it does suck to pretty much get cut after a win, right? Like, that's not really how it's supposed to go down, but here we are, pour one out indeed for Martin Buday. And again, at heavyweight, it's not like they're like, well, we need to clear some space.
Yeah.
Right? We need to clear some space for some new guys coming in. Like, you got plenty of room over there.
Maybe they're thinking, NFL team's going to be starting to cut those rosters down. The Monster Factory is going to get going. We're going to need some roster spots.
God, we need to do that. We need to find a way to make money off of this. I really want to.
It's too good.
Last question this week comes to us from Conor McGregor's coked up yacht mechanic, who writes, did you see Brock Lesnar show up at SummerSlam, as in the same Brock Lesnar who was named in that whole sex trafficking lawsuit thing against Vince McMahon? We were having ourselves such a nice time, too. Am I the only one who doesn't see how it's worth it to bring back a damn near 50-year-old version of Brock Lesnar? That's a good reference. Basically telling everyone who gives a shit about little things like corporate sex slavery to fuck off, all just so they can squeeze a few last pops out of a dude who always ends up getting sick of this shit and going home to his weirdo compound in the end anyway. What am I missing? Not only did we bring back Brock Lesnar this week, Vince McMahon went out and got himself in a car accident, which sounded like a result completely of his own negligence. I know that's going to blow your mind. Vince McMahon
sounded crazy, honestly. It sounded like fucking like you could have been way, way worse for everybody than it was.
Yeah. I did see a headline online that said Vince McMahon tragically survives car accident. Which I thought
out there with some of that, it should have been Lars energy. I see.
Yeah. You bring back Brock to, it seems like, feud with John Cena during what is at least being billed as John Cena's last ride here in the UFC. I guess it makes a certain amount of sense from like a monetary / storyline perspective. The WWE fan, we've talked about professional wrestling fans in the past being, seemingly somewhat more progressive than your MMA fan base, but it didn't sound like anyone was too bothered when we hit the Beast's music at SummerSlam and Lesnar came. By the way, the overall look that Brock Lesnar is rocking these days it's unbelievable. The look. Cowboy hat, kind of like top knot ponytail pulled back with the receding hairline. He doesn't really tan, he just turns red, and he's wearing like a leather vest.
Yeah, the leather vest, incredible, and a cowboy hat to me. Yeah, I did wonder. I was like, did he just show up and what he had from home? Like, is it? Do we feel like there's a guy where there's limited options for him in wardrobe because you're not going to get off the rack shit that fits this man? Because it was like clearly somebody has made some choices here, but I don't know what they were thinking behind some of those. I was working on a thing recently for an upcoming article I'm writing on Jake LaMotta, and if you find any pictures of Jake LaMotta in like the last couple decades of his life, he is almost always wearing like a cowboy hat, which for a guy who was the Bronx Bull is a little bit surprising. You're just like, huh? But it's like people in writing about him, they're like, at some point in his old age, he decided cowboy hat. Like, I'm a cowboy hat guy now. And that was it. If you saw him in public after that, he's at the, Boxing Hall of Fame induction ceremony. He's 90 years old. He's in a goddamn cowboy hat. End of story. And I wondered, like, has Brock Lesnar hit that era for him? It did also seem like my man looked a little winded, even without doing a ton. And so it was just like, all right, what are we actually doing here? You're right that in the moment, I think everybody is just like, hey, it's a big pay-per-view kind of thing, one of your big events. We want some big surprises to go with it. So you hit us with that and we go, oh, holy shit. And the holy shit takes the place of people being like, what the fuck, bro? Yeah. And I think it was one of those where once people had a little bit of time, because it was over pretty much before you had a chance to think too much or react too much. And I think the next day after is when people started to kind of go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So the one wrestler named in this Vince McMahon thing as like, hey, we're going to take our sex slave and toss her Brock Lesnar's way. And he's like, cool, man. And that's not great. And then it's just like, so you're telling, like I saw somebody point out, and they're like, so you're telling me Triple H goes and meets with Trump. And then like 3-4 days later, we get the guy named in the sex trafficking lawsuit back on the run. Like, are we sitting around just being like, we need some bad people?
Who's your worst person? Who's the worst person in your contacts right now?
Everybody on the team is a bad person. Like, we need some bad human being to show up. Like, Trump going on there and be like, I liked it more when you guys had sex offenders. Where are the sex offenders at, man? Give me some more sex offenders. If there's more of us around, each one of us doesn't look quite as bad or quite as much of an outlier. So get them back in. Like that, the kind of timing and optics of that did seem weird. Yeah. But it is interesting because it's like you do still get the sense, at least in like the kind of day after reactions, wrestling fans are the ones who might actually give a shit, whereas MMA fans would just be like, hell yeah, bro.
Yeah. The weird part to me about the timing of this Brock Lesnar return is that WWE is kind of in the middle of a charm offensive right now, as they kind of have to be with the departure of Vince McMahon. Have you watched any of the Unreal documentary series over on Netflix?
No, I saw stuff about it, but I haven't watched it.
I just finished watching it over the weekend because despite all of my best intentions, I am a goddamn sucker for any backstage professional wrestling documentary, even if it is produced by WWE and Netflix about the WWE and its debut on Netflix. So goddamn good and well, they're not showing you anything that they don't 100% want you to see. Like this is an in-house production.
When it comes to behind the scenes anything these days, right. Documentary, it's only people making shit about themselves.
But this has got to be a joint production of WWE and Netflix That's as kayfabe as anything you're going to see on Monday Night Raw itself. And yet I am still just like, give it to me. I am starving for behind the scenes WWE action. Show me Triple H and Michael P.S. Hayes sitting in Gorilla, calling the match as it goes, and I will watch. I don't
Did
even
it
like.
scratch any itches for you?
Oh yeah, you know what else it did? It 100% realized its goal of getting me to care a little bit more about what's going on with the product right now, because I've been looking in. I've been, been sticking my beak in, peeking at what's going on over there at WWE at Netflix.
I stuck the beak in for SummerSlam.
Yeah, and you know what? They got a decent product going on over there right now, aside from the like president mandated number of sex offenders that need to be on the roster. They got like a pretty good product right now.
It did, though. I saw videos from the crowd where they showed on the Jumbotron shots of Triple H meeting with Trump, and even just showing the guy's image, like not even the man himself at the event, just showing the guy's image up on the screen. He got booed. You could hear the boos in the crowd there. So you're just like, you're still finding out there's a difference in the demographics. Remember when Dana White showed up at WrestleMania and heard some boos? They even showed him a second time at WrestleMania because they were just like, wait a minute, maybe they were booing Jelly Roll or something. And, and when we cut to Dana White, they were still booing. Let's try it again. They booed, and they got booed louder the second time. So it's like there is a difference in the demographic and how they view some of this shit. It is not the same audience. You can see that. But it is like when you see stuff like that, you're like, are your interests so served by pandering to the world's most insecure man that you will still keep doing shit like that, even when your audience is telling you, fuck you, we hate this?
Yeah. The one thing that did, in fact, kind of blow my fucking mind when I had the chance to think about it, about this WWE documentary, assuming that this was real, but like leading up to the John Cena heel turn, where like he hugs Cody Rhodes and then boots him in the nards, and it's clear that he has turned and that he's for whatever it was good for at the moment, he was on Team Rock and all this other stuff. So at least according to this documentary, they basically only told the guys involved in that angle that Cena was going to turn heel because they wanted to keep it a secret. So they told Rock, Cena, Cody Rhodes, and kind of hilariously Travis Scott, the rapper, who was also involved in the angle. And there is some hilarious stuff in this documentary where they're talking about keeping the circle tight on this thing, and then Triple H is basically like, "Oh, we got to make sure Travis is on board. We got to keep Travis in the loop on this one," which is hilarious. But the thing that blew my mind. So this is at a WWE pay-per-view, right? I can't remember which one. Maybe it was the Rumble. I can't remember. But this is a night that is probably worth tens of millions of dollars, right, to WWE in terms of like pay-per-view and all the rest. And when you're dealing with something as important as the John Cena heel turn, like you got to think that's maybe worth hundreds of millions of dollars, because that's basically like one of your dominant storylines for however long, but basically for the rest of Cena's WWE run here. And basically Triple H is calling it live to the guys in the truck as it happens. And I was kind of like, that is kind of wild, man, in this world of sort of like corporate everything is totally sanitized and over everything. And it's for the shareholders, and we got to make sure everyone gets their value. The fact that in wrestling, this weird ass carnival sideshow, we are still keeping secrets like that, and then sitting in Gorilla telling the guys in production basically shot for shot what is about to happen live at an event that is probably worth tens of millions of dollars is wild to me that we did that.
But also that as it's happening, Travis Scott is sitting there telling his friends, I knew that shit was going to happen. I'm in the loop.
Yeah, they kept me in the loop on that. In any case, that's going to do it for the Co-Main Event podcast this week. We'll be over at the Patreon page the rest of the week. We got the live chat coming up tomorrow. doing the damn thing on Thursday. Friday's Power Hour to get you ready for this weekend's action. I assume we will talk about Roman Dolidze versus Anthony Hernandez at some point over there this week. Come on over to patreon.com/co-main event and join the team. We'd love to have you there. As for right now, thanks everybody for the support. We are done. We are through. We are out. We got to talk about this Instagram reel that you sent me earlier today where the Seattle Kraken mascot, Buday, damn near gets eaten by a grizzly bear.
The grizzly bear, they're standing there fishing in a stream, and the grizzly bear shows up, and then it's like he sees Buday, and he's just like, I don't know what the fuck that thing is, but I want to investigate. And like, as soon as you see it, kind of see him, you go, this was a bad idea to have Buday standing out there looking all weird and yet very prey, like he looks like a prey animal in some sense, and impossible to miss. And here we are in Grizz country. That ain't a good idea.
That bear is not even for 1 second afraid of a giant troll. He's like, I wonder what troll tastes like, and is doing the like charging at the mascot to try to kind of like ward it off. Man, how scared are you if you are inside a mascot suit, surrounded by a bunch of other professional athletes? No, commitment to the craft for sure, to the professionalism. You know damn well everyone else is thinking, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun Buday. Right? It's like near-death experience for this guy in the troll outfit.
What a way to go that would be.